getting more efficient. The panel is already in situ. Will you please welcome the panel for our discussion on the challenges of securing modern mobile environments. We have Shirley Finnerty from Microsoft. We have Pavel Gladyshev from UCD, Forensic Science. We have, Forensic Computing, I should say. We have Niamh Muldoon from DocuSign, and we have Paul Hyland from Glen, Dimplex. If you give them all a warm round of applause. And because they were in situ in advance, we were chatting during coffee and we were talking about what it is that we would be talking about. And I said, well, obviously, the issue of security in the mobile environment is an important issue, and I think we should probably start there. And Niamh said, what do you mean by mobile? To which I went for honesty and said, I don't know. And she said, well, that's really where we have to start, which is what actually is mobile? What's the definition of it and what are the implications? So over to you, Niamh.
So yeah, I was just saying there that I think it's the combination of mobile and digitalization that has transformed how we compute and operate in business today. So now we can conduct our lives and our business from anywhere, any location, any time, and on any device, and preferably using DocuSign, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it's true to say that 82% of enterprises today have moved to cloud-based applications, so being able to access your data across geographical borders.
What percent?
82% of enterprises.
It's that high, yeah.
It's that high, and we are also seeing up to 62% at the end of 2017 moving to digital transaction platforms, so replacing paper-based processes and workflows with electronic and digitalized versions. And that's where we come in about understanding your digital information assets and how to protect them on these mobile devices.
Well, pick up on the mobile devices. Paul, when we're using the term mobile devices, we mean what, first of all?
So effectively any device which you can use, whether it's your laptop, your tablet, your phone, anything which means that you can access data on the enterprise network, that is a mobile device. And I suppose we've transitioned where, I suppose, mobile device when I was far younger was the mobile phone, and it was a new technology. We've moved well away from that. That's pretty much every single device. So we've changed from not how we do business, but when and where we're doing it. So moving away from being at your desk to accessing your data anytime, any place, anywhere. And it's been a trend where that's been the expectation. So that, you know, people will start in organizations and expect that to be the norm, because that's what they do. They do their banking, you know, online from anywhere. They do pretty much everything they need to do. So there's an expectation when they start in a business, that's what happens. And I suppose that can be difficult for a business in respect that there's a tendency to want people sitting at their desks. For very traditional businesses, that they want you at your desk, they want you there from 9 to 5 or longer if they can, and that's how they work. You know, so we're
because presumably there are businesses who struggle to believe that work is happening if they can't open a door and see it.
I suppose it's the nature of the business. So some businesses decide to measure productivity rather than time. So if you're doing your job, that's what they want. Whereas some businesses prefer to take the security that if you're at your desk, that's, you know, you're doing your job, which is not necessarily the truth. You know, it's you always hear the story of someone who leaves a jacket on the back of their desk to always pretend that they're in the office. You know, it doesn't mean anything, whereas productivity does, and I suppose mobility gives us that. You know, it doesn't matter where.
And I assume, Shirley, that is a trend that is only going to continue. That's going to become more and more the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that a lot of organisations are really, really embracing the whole mobile environment. And they're really using to their benefit and their to advantage in terms of opening up new revenue streams, differentiating their products and services. But I suppose this is where the dichotomy sits and lies in terms of, you know, business leaders and IT managers really trying to get that balance right between empowering their employees to work from anywhere, you know, bringing their own devices into the workplace, but also ensuring that they can manage security. And you know, I suppose when I'm talking about security on devices, I'm talking about the data, talking about the users' identities and the devices themselves. So this is a huge challenge for IT and business decision makers to actually, you know, make that leap between going into the digital world, going mobile, but at the same time making sure that they're protected.
Can you lay out, or in slightly more detail, the nature of that challenge, the nature of that risk? Pavel, maybe you might give us a sense that the more mobile use there is, the more cloud use there is. What are the threats that are hand in hand with that?
Well, I think the mobile working and the security of mobile working is not entirely new. We had laptops for like 20 years now, if not more. I think a far-fetched example would be my childhood memory of Gorbachev going to a meeting with a foreign leader, and there is a Marine beside him nearby holding this little case with the nuclear button. That's your mobile work at a distance. And I think the challenges that they have in securing this process are still at play now. So in their case, for example, there is a two-man rule. So it's a decision that have to be made by at least two officials at the same time.
To actually fire the nukes?
Yes, if not more.
Tell me that still applies in the US, does it?
I don't know. I cannot claim that, and I don't claim to be expert on nuclear security in any way. But it strikes me that there are two views on this matter. On one hand, we have people who say, hey, everybody's entitled to digital freedom. And then there are us, older style camp, who say, no. You just cannot bring your own devices into the business environment because it opens the whole can of worms. I think the right way to think about it is to start from risk analysis, because some things really need to be secured, like a nuclear button, and therefore appropriate security needs to be applied to that. And then others perhaps allow for less security.
It's a difficult challenge. I mean, that was one of the things that I think it was Mark was talking about, the thing of work out what the threats are and then put a policy in place that says, for instance, no personal email. But for a generation of millennials who are bring your own device people, who are personal email and corporate email overlap and intertwine, how do you install those kind of practices?
So I think it comes down to understanding what are your digital information assets. So what are you trying to protect? And once you've got that in place, it's then embracing the digitalization around that. So how do you go about doing it? And it's transforming your existing information security framework that's probably inward facing. It starts at the policy level, standards, procedures, and making it to be an ecosystem where you're starting at the law level and the regulations, what allows data to be transferred across geographical borders, and how do we protect it when it is transferred across geographical borders.
Now, can you give us an example of the difference in the real world? In an organization, what's the difference between those two if you saw it in operation?
So it would look like really the current information security framework. It might look like a castle. All the data is housed, stored inside. You've got dedicated lease lines in, and you're really trying to control the flow of the data.
Right.
We're using cloud-based, it's like the ecosystem. Data can be stored, processed in the cloud, and transferred across geographical borders once you have the right framework in place.
And does that push responsibility onto the user then? Does it push responsibility onto the person who has the device?
I like to think it's joint responsibility, and how can we separate it out? It's by making sure that the cloud providers that you're selecting have security as a differentiator. And what does that look like? It's like, what are their industry certifications that they hold? Does it apply to their operations? Like ISO 27001 is a well-known European standard around information security and risk management. Do they have dedicated cybersecurity teams in place? What are their KPIs? How are they measured? And are these cloud organizations willing to sign up at the contract level to protect customer data?
It strikes me though, I keep thinking about that stat that we were showing that said, what was it, 63% I think it was, of attacks, of successful attacks were through emails where a person, no matter how much they were trained, clicked a link that they shouldn't have clicked.
And these ISO standards don't just look at the technical controls, they look at the processes and the people related. An information security program has all three, and that's what's going to shine through to products and services. You're never going to solve it with technical controls, and everybody in this room knows that. It's the combination.
Pavel, I saw you nodding there. Is the human actor in the security chain as important then as any cyber moves you might make?
Well, absolutely, because computer security cannot be considered in isolation. It's the part of the overall risk management, and I think everybody in this room would agree.
I think as well, just in terms of solutions for, mobile devices, I mean, there are a lot of solutions out there to help organizations. So it's looking at things like your operating system, making sure that you've got the latest version, making sure you've got all the security patches. I think in today's world where security threats are, on a daily basis, we're hearing about new threats, it's really, really critical that an organization is running the latest version of their operating system. There's also solutions like mobile device management tools, which can, again, support IT to set group policies. And then it's actually the devices themselves. While I'm not suggesting everybody needs to go and refresh their device every year, it is something that you need to kind of consider every 4 to 5 years. Have a look at your devices, make sure that they do actually support all the latest security features that your operating system delivers. So there are a number of things that an organisation can do to ensure that they are protecting their mobile users.
And how do you get back? I know I'm harping slightly on the human element, but I keep thinking of the instance we see where somebody leaves a laptop on a bus and an extraordinary amount of user data becomes available. How do you prevent that?
Again, that's all built into your mobile device management. You can set the policies. You can, for instance, when employees come into an organisation, when they leave an organisation, you can wipe their devices clean. So again, if they're bringing their own device into an organisation and they leave the organisation, you can wipe all their corporate data remotely from that device. So, Paul, I know you were going to add something there.
It's a balance. It is a fine-tuning that you want your users to be aware, you want them to be practical. The greatest person in the world will always make a mistake. They will always do something. There will be a very realistic-looking email. There'll be, they will leave their laptop in the car and the car gets stolen. So you ensure you put still the level of protection that you would put on-premise, off-premise. I suppose the difficulty is that there's a tendency to not know where your data is sitting at times, and that's the key thing. So like your laptops, you'll encrypt them. You'll make sure they're fully encrypted. So if it gets stolen, it's on the mobile phone. You want the ability to wipe it, so you containerize your data to make sure you can remove that corporate data in the event of it stolen or going missing. I suppose one of the difficulties is, especially with sort of the likes of smartphones, is that you don't have the level of control that you necessarily would other corporate devices. So, regards a standard thing for servers and desktops would be patching. You can't do that with a phone because it's controlled by the mobile phone vendor, not the mobile phone vendors, but the actual carriers, who will have a level of software which works with their services, is not necessarily the correct level. So, there's vulnerabilities in that allowing on your network, so you have to sort of make sure you've got the technical solution to back that up. Containerization is one. I suppose from the biggest difficulty with mobility is, and especially with the likes of GDPR coming in, is where your data is sitting. So traditionally, it would be sitting on your server. That's where people access it. But now it's everywhere. It's your mobile phone, your laptop, your tablet. It's everywhere. And people are extracting data. And I suppose that, from a compliancy as well as a security, that creates difficulties for enterprise.
Pavel, you want to come in there, did you?
Yes. I think more and more these days that security, computer security, is not so much technical issue as it is a social issue. And a few months back, I was trying to put this point across at a different event. You see, some people might believe that technology is inherently fallible, that we simply cannot build secure system. Well, I think that's not true. Because if you look at Android or if you look at iPhone, they are inherently much more secure than say, a PC-based laptop from 1990s or 2000s. And the reason for that is that, say, Apple computers and Google took very deliberate design steps that produce a much safer system at the expense of it being less flexible and less usable than, say, a general-purpose PC. For instance, unless you go into pains of trying and root your mobile device, you can't really install, say, unsafe app from place other than the Apple App Store. And that greatly increases security, but it makes it less flexible and less convenient to use. So I think it's the social contract between businesses and vendors, between society and vendors, that prevents from secure systems being designed and deployed.
Niamh, you would want to come in there and I cut across you.
I think it's still the combination of all three, the technical, the processes, and the people. For all the data breaches that were reported in 2016, the highest number came from vulnerabilities at the technical level. And the next down was user intervention and credentials and encryption keys. So if we were to take, what's your vulnerability management policy, how are you applying your critical vulnerabilities, the patching of them across your technical infrastructure, look at that. Look at your processes around access control management, password management, password complexity, and then the user intervention, like your awareness campaigns. How are you keeping your staff informed around social engineering, phishing? How are you preventing? What's the support there? I don't think we can look at any three in isolation. And that was just the stats for last year.
And should you be accepting the trend to kind of bring your own device or use your corporate device for private business? Is it better to try to keep a clear delineation so that the organisation has control over that which is corporate business?
Well, I'm all about digitalisation. I'm working at DocuSign. It's around having the right framework in place, understanding what are your information assets, your digital information assets, and what policies you want to apply to protect them. I think if you recognise the business model and society where we're all going and support it to move forward, where people come and speak to you about cloud-based computing and use the security in cloud-based computing and the providers of it as distinguishing factors around how you can control and protect your data.
Can we talk a little bit about cloud-based computing? Again, going back to a slide we had earlier on where there is no such thing as the cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. Do we have too great a reliance, or do you see organizations, Paul, in your view, is there too much reliance on the security and threat protection provided by the cloud provider? Do we outsource all of that and say somebody else look after it?
I don't think we can outsource it and say somebody else. I think we have to do our due diligence and understand the service we're using. I think, when you look at the likes of whether it's, Dropbox, Box, Microsoft, Amazon, they have a level of security which is probably, as good as you're going to get, better than a lot of enterprises will be able to provide. Mm-hmm. But the issue is that middle piece. It's, it's your business, it's your users, so they will have control. So it's how they operate in that environment. So it's not the other person's computer as such. It's how your users, are operating and using that technology. And it's pretty much the same, like, sort of, I agree with Pavel and to a certain extent in respect that if I want to attack a business and, I'm a bad guy, the one common thing, no matter what businesses we're in, are people. So it's an easy attack vector right from the start. So again, it's really down to how those people use those technologies. So yeah, making sure the technologies are in place, but also user education.
Well, on the user education, Shirley, do you think that users assume that they have too much capacity to rely on the cloud suppliers?
I think to some degree, yes, but back to your point, even in terms of enabling, bringing your own devices into the environment, I think it is something that we should support. And I think, whether that's looking at the cloud solutions, whether it's looking at your on-premise solutions, I think it's key for an organisation to really enable all of those solutions, to really support that user, to bring their device into the environment, into the work environment. And again, we touched on millennials. If you consider a HR department in an organisation, we want to attract the best talent into our organisations. And millennials have been brought up with this digital world. They've been, using mobile phones probably since the day they were born. They're touching every screen possible. So, we want to ensure that we're attracting talent into our organisations and that we can deliver the environment that they expect. I mean, they expect to be able to work from, a remote locations, and they expect to be able to use their devices. So I think coming back to the key to this is just ensuring that, you leverage the solutions that the cloud providers deliver, you leverage the solutions that your on-prem solutions deliver as well, and you just ensure that you have those policies in place. And I think, that's the way forward. I think, that's the direction that we're moving in.
What about the use of mobile devices in the way that Tom was describing happened with the DNC? What about that kind of use where the mobile device becomes a way to use its GPS to track the user, has the microphone switched on during important meetings, all that kind of stuff? Do you need to be a senior member, Pavel, of the DNC for that to be an issue, or is that the kind of thing that will become a threat more common?
Well, I think that's why we shouldn't. Again, I'll give you an example. We run our website in the cloud. It's all public information, and I'm absolutely happy to have it there. If I put my consultancy hat on, will I put my client data in the cloud? No way, never. So there are different, because it's sensitive. I'd keep it not connected to network, etc., etc. So I think a lot depends on the specific information asset that is being discussed. And I agree with Shirley that we need to provide a kind of suitable environment modern environment for the workforce. But at the same time, I think some companies might be overdoing it a little bit in that regard.
What does it look like when they overdo it? What does it look like when they overdo it? What are the kind of things that you see companies doing where you say, that's too much?
Well, I think if wearing T-shirt is considered mandatory, that's not good.
My T-shirts?
No, absolutely not. I think everybody should be comfortable in the work environment. If you work to wear a T-shirt, good stuff. If you want to wear a suit and tie, good stuff. Now, I think I work a lot with bright students from Ireland, from abroad, and I think the good ones, even though they are millennials and they're used to this technology, they understand the need for security, and they're happy to constrain themselves to using secure, constrained environments if the job so requires.
Steve?
Just in relation to my T-shirts, I'm all about, as many people know, I lecture at National College of Ireland, and I'm all about promoting. I'm very passionate about security. I say take your security passion and make it happen. But DocuSign presented my 9-year-old son with this T-shirt. So on the back it has Crean 1, and I hope he follows in my footsteps. So that's the personal background to my T-shirt, and he asked me to wear it.
Nice background T-shirt.
Just on the actual...
Please tell me this isn't about your tie. Tell me we're back to cybersecurity, Paul, please.
But you don't have to be a member of the DNC. We're seeing cases, on a regular basis, on the papers where through social media, people are being contacted, they're being filmed in compromised positions and whatever, unknowns to themselves because they don't realize their camera's being switched on, the microphone's being switched on. So even in people's day-to-day activities, hackers are using these techniques to compromise people on their daily lives, never mind on a sort of business level. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be,
And that is not the stuff of sci-fi. That is a real threat in day-to-day life.
But there was a case there where there was a site which basically had sold access to compromised baby cams. So hundreds of compromised baby cams. You could log on and view these. For whatever reason, this was a site that was found. So, yeah, this is day-to-day activities. So,
do you think outside of people in your profession, within organizations, do you think senior management, do you think staff understand that those threats are present?
Yes and no. I think they understand it, but I don't think they apply to their day-to-day activities generally. I think there's a little bit naivety, and I suppose everybody here is reasonably well educated in the areas of security, so we do hear those scare stories. We're researching them, we're finding them, so we know what can happen. People don't see that, and I suppose the good thing is now whereas before cybercrime was never reported. It was something that was happening. Now it's a big story. And I suppose as those stories get bigger and people become more aware, that's when they'll add it into their day-to-day lives.
How common is it, by the way, this may be outside the area of expertise, but for the payment of ransoms, one of the discussions was that you don't ever do it. How common is it that ransoms get paid?
Well, I don't have statistics, but it does happen quite a lot.
It's the norm.
Yeah.
It's the norm.
I don't know if it's the norm that they get paid.
On a user, on a consumer level,
Okay.
Not an enterprise level.
Yeah.
I think enterprise levels have to back up, should have
Offsite backup and
laptops
everything,
backed up and all that. But if you look at the level of, from a consumer basis, it's, from my understanding, it's considered the norm that, you know, if a normal person gets a ransomware attack, they end up paying because they don't know where to go.
All right, time for us to take some questions, folks. Anyone want to ask a question? Usual drill. If you fling hand up in the air, we will come to you. This is like, it's fast becoming a cattle mart. Anybody got a question? We got a question in the back. Anybody? No? By God, we could be wrapped up on... Okay, we have a question down here, just in gentleman standing up there. And then have we another one to follow this gentleman? Anybody else want to ask one thereafter? Great, we have one just down here. We'll come straight down to the front after this question. Yes, sir.
Hi. My question is, how do you manage the supply chain risk introduced by the Android market?
How do we manage which risk introduced by the Android?
Supply chain.
Supply chain risk introduced by the Android market.
Wish the camera got somewhere else. I suppose you have to treat it like every other risk. You treat it like any device. You have to understand how you access, what it's accessing, and how you're going to manage it. So really, the technology shouldn't come into it. It's always the same approach. So basically, the data should be locked down. You know, if it's a case of you don't want it sitting on a mobile device, if it should be containerized. And it should be a standard enough approach. If you don't want data to be lost, you encrypt it and make sure you can retract it.
Pavel, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, if you look at specifically Android software development model, Google supplies basic software distribution, and then vendors provide their own drivers for the particular hardware that they implement. And I used to work in a company that made Internet of Things items. And there was no legal or customer drive to make systems extremely secure. And I think if you speak to hardware engineers, very few of them are actually aware of the, even at this day and age, aware of how secure software should be developed. So I think at the large business-to-business level, it's service-level agreements. Like if you can, again, I wouldn't trust Android, somebody's device bought from a consumer shop. If you're talking about building a special hardware for the company, then maybe you can deal with the vendor.
Okay, we'll take one further question. We have a question just here in the second row from the front, gentleman here on the end. Yes, sir.
Do you think that the wider adoption of biometrics will limit the number of security breaches, or simply there will be more cut-off fingers on the streets?
How is cutting off fingers becoming a theme for today? This is our second go at it. Shirley?
Yeah, I mean, I think biometrics, I mean, fantastic developments in terms of, you know, looking at a new way of getting over the password issue. I think we're all pretty aware of, you know, that the risks associated with passwords. So biometrics has been a fantastic, I suppose, innovation in terms of a new way to sign into, securely sign into your devices, whether that's using your facial recognition, your iris recognition, or your fingerprint. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be fingerprint. So absolutely, I think it is a very good development. You know, and we're going to see more and more of this as more devices support biometrics. We're very much probably at the early stages at the moment, but from what we've seen, it is definitely a lot more secure than relying on passwords. So yes, we think it's a good thing.
Anybody else want to come in on that?
I think it's a different thing. So it will have its own weaknesses as the time goes by. Like passwords can be attacked using dictionary attacks, etc. I don't know, common features. Try to, I don't know, have a tablet with face and the program that generates all possible faces until one matches, something like that.
I like the way all of our Q&As end with actually designing criminal activity on the stage. Okay, we will draw the panel to a close. Can I ask for a round of applause for Shirley, for Pavel, for Niamh, and for Paul? Folks, I'll allow you to leg it if that's okay.